Very good evening. Warm welcome to all of you to the webinar series hosted by Advocates Association Bengaluru. Today we have with us a young, energetic academician with us, Mr. Pruthwi Bharadwaj, who is working as an assistant professor in National College at Bangalore. Mr. Pruthwi, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. A warm welcome to you on behalf of Advocates Association Bengaluru.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm honored.
Now, I would like to introduce our today's speaker, Mr. Pruthwi. He's a proud alumni of National College, where he obtained his master degree in English. Though he had got his basic degree in commerce, he changed his stream because of his love for English language and literature. His academic interest involves gender studies and film studies. During his free time, he loves reading books, especially poetry, and also watching movies. Thank you, Mr. Pruthwi. Once again, thanks for accepting our invitation. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, sir. The honor is mine for being invited to do a webinar in such a prestigious organization, especially in the series that I watched yesterday. Such legal luminaries that you have got earlier, and to come in the same series itself is my honor. And shall we begin the session, sir?
Yeah, sure. Sorry to interrupt you. We have our president, Mr. A.P. Rangnath, with us.
Sure. Sure.
So he has been our backbone, who is behind all these webinar series.
Okay.
You can start now. Thank you.
Namaste, sir. Rangnath, sir.
Namaste, Bharadwaj.
Namaste, sir.
I am former syndicate member also. I am in your college. I autonomous review committee first chairman.
Okay.
I was the syndicate member.
Okay.
2007 to 2010.
Okay. Honored, sir. Honored. Thank you. So, to begin with, we had an interesting thing to do with the title itself. I think some of you might have pointed it out earlier. Does anyone think the title is fine? Or does it have a grammar mistake in it? Or a typo mistake, whatever you want to call it. Our whole vocabulary is changed now. Earlier it used to be grammar mistake. Now it is typo mistake. We are actually putting the blame on the computer. But actually we also need to look at these things. Does anyone think there is a mistake in the title? You can post in the, I think you have a question and answer box, right?
Yes, yes.
I didn't see anyone.
That is not activated now, Mr. Pruthwi. So we have noticed it, and a couple of them have noticed it on the Facebook as well. So you can mention it.
Okay.
And you can
the title
continue.
says, sure, sir. The title says English language. How to not to make it an obstacle every day. So the mistake is obvious. We should not put the second to, because how to is already a phrase, and the question is simply in present tense. We need not put another to plus infinitive there. So the correct title would be how to not make it an obstacle every day. English language. Now, I think this is the first time I'm addressing a crowd of lawyers, obviously. I used to teach my students who are undergraduate students, and their specializations are different. I've never taught LLB students also. So I would like to keep this session very general as possible, and also as not boring as possible, because I know how boring can grammar rules be. And having gone the drill all my schooling years, of course, I had a weird love or passion with it. I don't think anyone shares it, or not many people share it. But still, it can become quite monotonous, because it is again just a bunch of rules, because language is arbitrary. An apple is called an apple. No one knows why it is called an apple, because some people called it an apple. It is an apple. So there are two types of grammar also. One is prescriptive grammar and the other one is descriptive grammar. We have learned prescriptive grammar all through our schooling, right from LKG, right from we learn how to make single letter words, two letter words, three letter words, phrases, clauses. We'll get into detail later. We have learned prescriptive grammar all along. But one thing we have not learned is, I think even the linguistics uh, shifted towards it later. And of course, Indian education system has still not implemented it properly. And some hi-fi schools, because English unfortunately has become this hi-fi thing. Some hi-fi schools might have implemented it, be it phonetics or be it descriptive grammar. And not to confuse you, prescriptive grammar is the set of rules, set of arbitrary rules that we have gone through the drill all our schooling. Descriptive grammar is something different. It is more democratic because prescriptive grammar is decided in England, is decided in the Royal College of London. But descriptive grammar is different. It is based on how people speak. It is based on how we use the language, because it is one of the most adaptive languages of the world. We'll get to it. So having gone through this detail, I am mixing both prescriptive and descriptive in today's session because we need both. And the contents of this today's session would be agenda, approach, approach as in how do we approach this language. Second, language learning. We are not the native speakers of this language. And then we go into a little bit of technical details. How is a sentence constructed? What are the parts of a sentence? And in sentence, what is a clause? How are they built? How are they constructed? And inside clauses, we go to phrases, and then we go to words. And then, as non-native speakers of the language, the biggest trouble that I see, I also teach in National College, where at least 20% come from outside Bangalore and they have difficulties with the language. The biggest difficulty that I see in all my students is that they mess up with the verb, they mess up with the time. Because time is represented differently in our languages and differently in English languages. There are few more complications in English that we'll discuss later. And then, of course, I'll give you a set of resources that I refer to do this session, as well as some other resources also that I find useful, because every time I meet a person from not English department, I've been asked to refer, to give a good book for their reference for grammar, English, communication, etc. So I would provide that also in them. What I found interesting, what I found very useful, that I'll try to provide in them. And I'll also share the PPT if you want, so that you can click on the link and you can go through that. So we'll come to the agenda of this session. To have the right...
If I can interrupt for a moment, could you be a bit more audible? I think if I am facing the problem, or if everybody is facing the problem, not sure. So sorry about it.
Now is it fine, sir?
Yes, now it is fine. Thank you.
I'm point it a bit nearer. Okay, the agenda of the session is to have the right approach, learning the language, removing apprehensions and inferiorities. Now, I know I'm speaking to a bunch of lawyers, juniors, seniors, luminaries, everybody. You are the lot who can convince anyone. Let me say you, I am a literature student, and I belong to the lot which is the most difficult to be convinced. So if I want to learn anything, if I want to start doing anything, I have to be convinced. And so I have put, it's called strategic location in literature. I've located my learning of this language in a few theoretical perspectives, uh, or you can call it ideological. I thought sharing that would be uh, clearing certain apprehensions or inferiorities of many people. So I would spend about 5 minutes on that. Then, of course, as we were telling, we'll go into the structure of the language, how our sentence is constructed. So here, I'm approaching it differently. Generally, in grammar classes, you're given the same old 8 parts of speech, noun, verb, all those 8 parts of speech, and you're bored to death. So I want to approach it differently. And why, I'll also say it in the future slides. And clauses and phrases, time and English language, stressing the importance of understanding the verb. The verb is the most integral part of English language, or a sentence from the English language. And since we are, we have all joined as lawyers, I'm sorry, you have joined as lawyers, that is a separate area, all those legal jargon, all those drafting, the language you need for that, it is a it is an entire area. So I would not touch upon that. We can neither cover the entire language in one session of an hour, nor can we touch all aspects of it. So I would rather keep it to general aspects of the language. Now, we were talking about the right approach to learning this language. Now, as we all know, this is the most global language that we have seen. No matter what route it came to all the countries, of course, it is a negative route. It was colonization and English language education. Let me tell you, as an English teacher, was brought for the colonization of the minds. Of course, as lawyers, you might have seen the Macaulay's minutes, all those things. There is a negative connotative history for English language in India, as well as other countries, be it Africa, be it uh, America, be it Australia. But there was one understanding of varieties of English before, until 20th century, before 2000, I guess, before the whole world was globalized. There was an understanding of the varieties of English, majorly 3 Englishes. So there is no one English. The second point is already destroyed. Majorly 3 Englishes. That was British English, American English, Australian English. What is the common point between all the three? Of course, one is the origin, the native land of the language, giving that privilege to them. What is the common factor among the other two? They are basically white people. So there was this racial bias that was operating in the recognition of the language varieties itself. For example, if an Australian drags the vowel, if he mispronounces something, it was called, okay, this is Australian English. They speak differently. If an American again drags the vowel, he's in a different way, in a different tone. His English is called American English. Actually, quite aspirational for many third world countries like us. We are so bombarded with American culture or American English that we find it aspirational to imitate American accent. Of course, there are classes to even teach that. Unless you are in a call center talking to Americans, I don't think we should be doing that or we should be learning that. So as lawyers, it is unnecessary for you people also. So there is this, then the question arises, what about the English spoken in Africa, in South America, in India, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, in China, in Japan? What are these languages? Until now, or until 20th century, it was just called wrong English, which was wrong, and people have corrected it. As theory also moved against universalisms. Not, I don't want to digress too much, but there is a shift in literary theory, critical theory also. Earlier, there used to be a center and everything revolved around it. Now we are in a postmodern world where there are so many centers and there are so many things revolving around it. So one such center, I would, we might call it, is Indian English. So whatever we are speaking, whatever I am speaking out now, might be wrong or even not understandable to a British person, and vice versa. Whatever he's speaking naturally, I might not understand it at all. Whatever I consume on the Netflix, I would, even as an English teacher, I would rely on the subtitles. So is there an Indian English? Of course there is. There is R.K. Narayan, there is Rajarao, there is Mulkraj Anand, who have all contributed to this wonderful language called Indian English. They all said there is a language called Indian English. They said it might have come from outside, but it is definitely not foreign or not alien. That's what R.K. Narayan said. And Rajarao said, I know, can someone please stop not audible?
You're audible, Mr. Pruthwi. Please go ahead.
Okay, okay. I think someone wrote not audible, so I was distracted. Okay. I hope I am audible to everyone.
So,
For me, you are audible. If
yeah,
somebody
it
has
is
sent you
audible.
such message, yes, it is audible.
Okay, okay, sure. So what Rajarao was saying is he wrote this Kantapura beautiful novel in English. That's a very, if you have any apprehensions about learning this language, if you have any inferiorities about learning this language, those two are different. Apprehension is, why should I forget my mother tongue? Why should I uh, become a servant by learning English, by forgetting my mother tongue, if you have any such apprehensions, or if you think that you might be from Kannada medium or you don't have a good base in the language, or if you think that English is the most necessary thing for your career and you cannot do without it, those inferiorities also, you should read that book, not even the book, the foreword to Kantapura. He talks about how, as an Indian, he is trying to position himself with the language English. He says, I write my tale, the tale of Kantapura, in this language. And I don't see any difference between what we used to have earlier. Because he said, we were always bilingual. I'm sure in the audience we have, or every one of us knows, forget English, let's rule out English. Every one of us know either two or three languages. Especially being Bangaloreans, more so, we know more than one language. We have always been like that. We Indians have always been like that. He says, Rajarao says, we always had two languages. One for the common people or the common expressions, and the other for knowledge production, most important. Knowledge production also had a different language in India. Historically speaking, it was Prakrit for a very brief time, it was Persian for a very brief time, and for the longest time it had been Sanskrit. He says, I am not throwing away my language, I am adapting a new language of production, that is English. He says, Sanskrit is replaced by English. I don't see any difference whatsoever. And he says one more beautiful thing. If you think English is a foreign language, if you think English is an alien language, it is. It has come from foreign roots, but still, we need to give the respect that that language deserves, because It might be, it might not be older than Kannada or Sanskrit, but it is definitely older than you and me. So at least from our side, we have to give the respect that it deserves actually. So the right approach is very important. You should neither have apprehensions that you are denying or betraying your mother tongue by learning this language, nor should you have inferiority. Thus, this is to use the right expression in Kannada. ಕಬ್ಬಿಣದ ಕಡಲೆ ಆಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು English. ಅಲ್ಲ ಕಬ್ಬಿಣದ ಕಡಲೆ ಅಲ್ಲ English. That's not the right approach. In positioning our arguments till now, it is just another language that we are using. As Bangaloreans, we know almost 3 or 4 languages: Kannada, Hindi, English, Telugu, Tamil. All these languages are so common in Bangalore. So it is just another language. And when you're a learner, you're a lifelong learner. I might have a degree in English, or more specifically in English literature. I'm always a learner of the language. No one, absolutely no one, okay, be it the senior most faculty in our field, be it the biggest teacher in our field, no one can amass the language completely. So don't think that you're not learned enough or your skills of this language is inadequate. You're always learning, and every situation needs different kinds of learning and different kinds of skills acquisition. For example, writing needs a different skill acquisition. In writing, you're writing different kinds of letter, drafting different kinds of documents, and all those things needs different kinds of languages. Inside English, they need a different tonalities. For that, you can't say that I know everything. Even I don't know everything. I refer to so many sources before preparing this presentation. One thing, another approach to the language. It is always incremental learning. By incremental learning, I mean ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕಲಿತಾ ಹೋಗೋದು. ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಹಾಗೆ ಕಲ್ತಿರೋದು. I'm sure even your subject law ಕೂಡ ಹಾಗೆ ಕಲ್ತಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಬುಕ್ ಒಂದು ಇಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷದ ಜಡ್ಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇದು ಅಂತೆಲ್ಲ ಓದಿರಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇದು ಥ್ರೂ ಯುವರ್ ಇಯರ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಎಜುಕೇಶನ್, through your years of experience as a lawyer, you might have learned it bit by bit. Language is also learned like that. It is always bit by bit, and it is always incremental learning. So that should be the right approach to the language. So coming to our next bit or next unit in this session, this is second language learning. As there is an Indian English, correct, there is all said and done, it's still a foreign language, like Raja Rao said, but it also deserves its respect. For us, it is a second language. Forget that we are not native speakers of this language. For us, as Kannadigas or as whatever mother tongue you have, we are not. It is not our first language. That is one point, and the other point is, how do you learn your mother tongue? How do you learn Kannada? How do you learn Telugu? How do you learn Hindi? It is always through hearing, right? It is always through hearing what people are speaking correctly. So I would suggest that you also consume more and more content in English, read more newspapers, read more literature, read more books. The point I'm trying to make through that is, but how come we are never grammatically wrong while we are speaking our language or our mother tongue? And how come we always falter, even I falter, when we are speaking English language? Why is that? Like I said, it is incremental learning. You've been learning your mother tongue right from your birth. English was introduced only in your school. And so there is that, to the learning also, there is this artificiality added to English language. It is always academics. It is always taught by teachers. It is an artificial setup to learn a language. So at least while you come out of the educational institution, you try to learn it through the world, through the culture, through imbibing, through absorbing cultures, through seeing what English speakers in India speak like, or other things. But all these points I made is for one important flaw or a mistake that we make while we write or speak this language. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನನಗೆ if everyone is comfortable, I'll go into a bit of Kannada here, just for 2-3 minutes. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ 2 ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ. ಕೃಷ್ಣನು ಶಾಲೆಗೆ ನಡೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಬಹುದಿತ್ತು. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಪೃಥ್ವಿ. If anyone, sir, Vikram sir, can anyone participate in this?
If anybody wants to volunteer, one of you can unmute and be a participant. Praveen ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಇದು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಡಿ, unmute ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಡಿ.
I unmute ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, yes.
Yes.
Any volunteer can start speaking.
Yeah,
Because
Tell me, Trivikram, I can help or I can take that lead.
yes,
Nice, sir.
I'm not able to recognize who it is. Please go ahead.
ಗಂಗಾಧರ sir.
Do not take your
Gangadhar, yes, yes.
sir. ನಮ್ಮ
Tell me.
ಸೆಕ್ರೆಟರಿ ಅವರೇ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಪೃಥ್ವಿ ಅವರೇ.
Sir, namaste, sir.
Namaste, Pruthwi. Tell sir.
He is
Sir.
also one of the instrumental person behind this webinar. Please, let me not interrupt.
Sure. ಸರ್, ಇವಾಗ ನಮ್ಗೆ 2 ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ.
ಹೌದು.
ಕೃಷ್ಣನು ಶಾಲೆಗೆ ನಡೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗುವುದಿತ್ತು. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಪೃಥ್ವಿ. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಏನಂತ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್?
Krishna should have walked to this school.
Correct. Krishna.
My name is Pruthvi.
My name is Pruthvi. So that is very clear. Krishna could have walked to the school. My name is Pruthvi. But ಇಲ್ಲಿ 2 ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಒಂದೇನೆ. ಬಟ್ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಸ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸರ್ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಈ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ? ಈಗ ಕನ್ನಡಲ್ಲೂ ಇದೆ, ನಮ್ಗೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಇದೆ. ಏನಾದ್ರು ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ 2 ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ?
ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಷನ್ ಆಗಿದೆ,
ಹೌದು
ಬಟ್ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
ಹೌದು, ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಸೇಮ್ ಇದೆ, ಬಟ್
ಹೌದು.
ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಇದೆ ಅಲ್ಲ?
ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು.
ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು.
ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಖಂಡಿತ ಹೌದು. ಬಟ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಜನರಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದು ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ತರ ತಗೊಂಡಿರೋದು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ರೈಟ್ ಇಟ್ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ಲಿ ಆಲ್ಸೋ. ಬಟ್ ವಾಟ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಟ್ರೈಂಗ್ ಟು ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಔಟ್ ಸರ್ ಹಿಯರ್ ಇಸ್, ಕೃಷ್ಣನು ಶಾಲೆಗೆ ನಡೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಬಹುದಿತ್ತು. ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಕುಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ವಾಕ್ ಟು ದ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್. ನಾವು ಲಿಟ್ರಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಪದ ಇಳಿಸ್ ನೋಡೋಣ ಇವಾಗ. ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಟು ದ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್, ವಾಕ್, ಕುಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಗಾನ್. ಮೀನಿಂಗೇ ಬರಲ್ವಲ್ಲ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ?
ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್.
ಯಾರೋ ಬರೆದ್ರೆ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಏನು ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಿತ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಸಿಂಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಎವ್ರಿ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಸಿಂಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್, ಹೌ ದ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಅರೇಂಜ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ ಅ ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸ್, ಹೌ ದ noun, how the verb, and how other aspects or other elements of a sentence are arranged in a sentence. ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾಷೆಗೂ ಇದು, ನಾವು ಈ ಕೃಷ್ಣನ ಶಾಲೆಗೆ ನಡೆದುಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗೋದಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ತೆಲುಗು ಕೂಡ ಇದೇ ತರ ಬರಿಬಹುದು, ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಇದೇ ತರ ಬರಿಬಹುದು. ಬಟ್ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತ್ರ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್. ಇದು ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ ಲ್ಯಾಂಗ್ವೇಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅರೇಂಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್. ನಾವು ತಪ್ಪು ಮಾಡೋದು ಅಲ್ಲಿನೇ, ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಕನ್ನಡ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತೀವಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರಿತೀವಿ. ಆವಾಗ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ವಿ ಮೆಸ್ ಅಪ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಪ್ಲೇಸ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್ ಹಿಯರ್. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ small thing that I wanted to point out. Sorry to bother you, sir.
No, not at all, Pruthvi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And another second sentence we have Nanna hesaru Pruthvi. If we literally translate it, my name Pruthvi. What is this extra thing here? The word is, right? Is is, what is it? What is the grammar element? It is a verb. It is an auxiliary verb or a helping verb. Now, that brings us to the parts of the sentence. So, this is I think every one of us have gone through this drill in the school. So I don't want to stress too much, but still pointing out the differences between the two languages, I want to say this. So in English, sentence has two parts of a sentence, subject and predicate. Subject is usually a noun and predicate is actually explaining what the noun is doing or what the subject is doing. Second sentence in Bandre now. My name is Pruthwi. Now, inside a predicate, there are again parts. It is verb and then object. Here we have this extra verb that we didn't have in Kannada. At least per sentence alladru namge words arrangement different ittashte. But idರಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಸ ಪದನೇ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. My name is Prithvi. 3 words ಇತ್ತು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ. English ಅಲ್ಲಿ 4 words ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. There is an important reason for that. Every sentence, every clause in English needs to have a verb, whether it's a regular verb, irregular verb, auxiliary verb, whatever kind of verb, it is always the meaning production in English language sentence is always defined by the verb. Subject might be the center of the conversation, but subject ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ವರ್ಬ್ ಇರಲೇಬೇಕು ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾಷೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ರೂಲೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ವಾಟ್ಸ್ಆಪ್ ಮೆಸೇಜಸ್ ತೆಗೆದು ನೋಡಿ, ಈಸ್, ವಾಸ್, ವರ್ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ಬರ್ದೇ ಇರಲ್ಲ. We would have totally missed it because we are not used to it. Our languages don't have it. Of course, many of you might be proficient in English and would not do that mistake. I'm just pointing out a common mistake. And unconsciously, we would have done that. I would have done that. So, in predicate, as I said, you have a verb and you have an object. So, important rule. Our languages don't have the rule that every sentence needs to have a verb. One verb ildiranu now complete sentence ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡ್ಬೋದು. For example, ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಪೃಥ್ವಿ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ verb ಇಲ್ಲ. But English language ಅಲ್ಲಿ you have a verb there. You can make a complete meaningful sentence in Kannada without a verb. But in English language, this is very important. So let's talk about the next rule in the building blocks of a sentence. So in every sentence, the subject has to agree with the verb. And what I mean agreeing with the verb is, subject verb agreement and every time it agrees antalla. Sometimes it may not agree, that is a negative sentence. Sometimes it might question, that is an interrogative sentence. That sometimes it might be surprised, that is an exclamatory sentence. All these types of sentences now nowadays. I don't want to bore you with all those things. That is why I'm just trying to point you towards the logics of this language. I think if we know the logics of a language, we are definitely in a very great position to crack it very easily. So every language is a set of rules. That's all. There is nothing more than that. So one important logic of English language is that the subject has to agree with the verb, or in other words, every sentence in English needs to have a verb in order to make it meaningful, unlike our languages, as we had already discussed. The relationship between the subject and the verb of a sentence defines the meaning it produces. So very important. Now, our sentence, meaningful sentence, if we have to make it a meaningful sentence, the relationship between the subject, which is usually a noun, and the verb of the sentence, the main verb of the sentence, has to be clear. And that very relationship defines the meaning of the sentence. So I'm not listing all the subject verb agreement rules. I don't want to, I was very conscious that I should not bore anyone today, because I know as an English teacher, I know the difference when I am teaching a poem, when I am teaching a grammar. Of course, you would say that when I'm teaching a poem, you'll sleep. When I'm teaching grammar, it is even more torturous. but still people are interested more in poetry or interested more in literature because I'll be telling a story. This is not a story. This is dry. This is a set of rules. So I was very conscious in trying to make it as less boring as possible. So when the subject is a word which has both singular and plural as the same word. Here we have two sentences. The species is on the brink of extinction. The species are on the brink of extinction. So species, when we say species, it is both the singular and the plural of the word. So there is no distinction between them. And they've pointed out the preposition in the bracket. That is how it would be represented when you're talking about the same topic in a different sentence, continuing it. So it is it and they. By it, it is singular. By they, it is plural. Is and are. Now, a noun which has no plural at all. For example, the news about the king's death has been reported around the world. The news, we get confused that it has the word, it has the letter S at the ending. It must be plural. No, it is not the plural. It doesn't have a plural at all. News is a singular word. Collective nouns with singular and plural. The government is debating the new law. The government are debating the new law. We have to remember it gives completely different connotations, right? And when I say the government is debating the new law, it almost means that there is a singular entity called government, or I know it is completely different, or the state is actually discussing the new law. It might also connote that. But when I say the government are debating the new law, it might mean the parliament is debating the new law or the cabinet is debating the new law. So the subject and verb, what is the relationship between them? Here the subject is the same in both the sentences, the government, the government. But how is the meaning changing? Because the verb is changing. The verb is changing from is debating to are debating. So as we were discussing earlier, this very relationship makes it very important in meaning making of a sentence. Quantifying something. This is another one of the most common mistakes that we make. I would also make this mistake. It says 3 minutes is perfect for tea. 100 pounds is a fortune. So whenever we quantify something, because it is 3, because it is 100, we make it into plural. No, because it is a set amount, because it is a set time. It becomes singular. It is signifying 1 unit of time. And 1 unit of time is 3 minutes. It is signifying 1 unit of amount. And that 1 unit is 100 pounds. So it becomes singular. I think this is one of those tips that you have to remember. This is one of the most common mistakes that we make. Indefinite nouns. When the nouns are indefinite, it is not defining anything. Something is coming. We don't know what is coming. It is making terrible noise. It is a indefinite noun. We don't know what it is. So again, we cannot define it as either singular or plural and change the verb to it are making terrible noise. Something are coming. It is very wrong. So again, we have to remember that thing also. Now, we are moving to the next part of the grammar, or not traditional grammar, how the language is constructed. We are going from big to small. We spoke about sentences. Now we speak about distinctive units of inside sentences. A sentence is made up of clauses. What is a clause? A clause is the basic unit of grammar. Every clause must contain a verb. That means to say, it is from here that we get the rule that every sentence will have a verb, because there is no clause without a verb and there is no sentence without a clause. It can also be complete sentence on its own, but it can also be a part of complex or compound sentences with multiple clauses. I have an example here. After having spent 6 hours at the hospital, they eventually came home. So we have, I think some of you might have already noticed it or figured it out, that these are actually two sentences. I spent 6 hours at the hospital and they eventually came home. They eventually came home would be the second sentences. So here we are joining two sentences using a conjunction. Here conjunction is after. After having spent 6 hours, this becomes the main clause, the main sentence, which is producing the main meaning of the sentence. And there is a subordinate clause or a dependent clause. They eventually came home. Why is it dependent or subordinate? Because it relies on the main clause for its meaning. Who are they? We know it from the main clause. What is eventually? How can you say eventually came home in an independent sentence? Because it is followed by a different action in the first sentence. From where did they come home? From the hospital. So all that meaning making, it is borrowing from the main clause. So a sentence can be one clause, two clause, three clause, or more clauses than that. A sentence can run into pages with multiple clauses. So that is simple sentence, complex sentence, compound sentence. Finite clauses. It must contain a verb. I'm talking about types of clauses now. Now this is again, it's almost betraying the promise that I will not say the boring rules, but this is important because these are the areas where we make the most common mistakes. Finite clauses. It must contain a verb which shows tense. That means to say the verb, it should also define the time of the verb. It can either be a main clause or a subordinate clause. It can be positioned wherever it can, but the tense of the verb must be clear, must be defined. That makes it finite, that makes it defined. Is it raining? Raining is the main verb, which is in present tense. I spoke to Joanne last night. Spoke is in past tense. So these two are examples of finite clauses. Non-finite clauses, obviously the opposite of it. Verb does not show tense. You can see the verb, but the time is actually not defined by the verb. When the subject is the same in both the clauses, subordinate clauses will usually be non-finite. So this, going back to this example, I think, okay, we have the same example. Yeah. After having spent 6 hours at the hospital, they eventually came home. Here, the non-finite clause is the second clause, they eventually came home. We don't know when they came home. They eventually came home. What is the first event? After having spent 6 hours at the hospital. So the verb does not show the tense. Came is just a participle form of a verb. It need not define any tense or it need not define any time because came is also used in present tense. You might search it. These are what makes us confusing. I don't know what to say. These are the areas where we are confused the most because when I say came, it is past tense, and we use it only when the sentence is in past tense. But sometimes we have to use the participle form of a verb even in a present tense. We'll go into verb later. So we have another example. I had something to eat before leaving. I had something to eat before I left. Before is the conjunction is. It is just one word here. Before I left or before leaving. It is just one word. And it need not show any particular tense. Relative clauses. Defining relative clause is to give information about a noun or an object. So all sentences have relative or not defining relative clauses or non-relative clauses because a function of a sentence is about speaking what the noun is doing. The woman who found my wallet handed it in the reception. So the woman who found my wallet handed it in the reception. Who found my wallet? The woman, first sentence. Handed it in the reception. The woman handed it. Who handed it in the reception? The woman handed it to the reception. So it is giving information about the woman. Two actions that she did, two definitions of the noun are presented in these clauses. Non-defining relative clause to give extra information to a noun or a noun phrase. Again, phrases will come later. My friend's birthday, which was last weekend, was great fun. So the first information, which is a defining clause, is defining relative clauses, which was last weekend. My friend's birthday, when was it? It was last weekend. What is the extra information? It was great fun. And you have to know the correct punctuations, where to put which clause, how to connect sentences. All these are very basic grammar rules that you need to brush. There is no shortcut for that. And by brushing, again, I don't mean that you have to write an exam. It is incremental learning, as I've been saying. Bit by bit, learn one tip a day. There are so many uh, great channels of information because uh, as we know, this is the biggest language, this is the global language. There are thousands and millions of resources to learn English language. My role as a facilitator, not even as an educator, I would see myself as an educator when I'm guiding someone to read literature, to how to read poetry. Here I'm just a facilitator because you have everything at your disposal, be it in so many books or be it in so many websites, internet, YouTube, everywhere. So we are moving to the next unit of language. From sentences, we move to clauses. Then we are now moving to phrases. And inside phrases, you have words, phrases and words. That's how a language is constructed. Even Kannada is constructed like that. One sentence, clause, phrase, word. And in words, you have all these things. Rules of noun, verb, uh, conjunction, interjunction, all these 8 parts of the speech. But I'm not concentrating on that because the meaning making of a sentence is based on how you position that word. That is the most important thing, and that is why, which is why we are concentrating on only till phrases, if I may say so. A small group of words standing together as a conceptual unit, typically forming a component of a clause. Languages really the closest we have is, it is not correct, it is not the exact translation, but Jodi Pada antiv is Jodi Pada alla idu. Even English has pair words, but we don't have this thing in our languages. Friday became a cool, wet afternoon. It's also called idiom, and idiom is culturally specific. The idioms used by an Englishman in London is different from the idiom that I use. It is cultural specific, and ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡುವಾಗ ಗಾದೆಗಳನ್ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ನಾಣ್ಣುಡಿಗಳನ್ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ in English also we use different kinds of idioms to express better. And in those idioms you have phrases. And there are books about phrases and idioms also. I think I have this book, Dictionary of Phrase and Fable. There are books on idioms also. I think I need not read you out all these things, but let me be clear. There can be nouns and there can be noun phrases. There can be verbs as well as verb phrases. So every unit of language can be put in a phrase and it can be called as a gerund phrase, infinitive phrase, a prepositional phrase, etc. So this micro unit aims to pick a few, of course you can never cover completely, pick a few common errors of using words and phrases. And I've tried to organize it thematically. This is actually the last unit of the session, but we'll go into time as well while we are progressing. This is very random that I've picked because it is just that in my limited experience as a teacher, I've seen a few common mistakes that people make, even as an observer of society, how people speak this language. These are very random. Don't think these are the only two mistakes that we make or these are the only few rules that we want to subscribe to. Because as I've already said, we cannot cover the entire language. I have learned it 12 years, 15 years. We can't cover it in 1 year. I'm sorry, not even 1 year, 1 hour. So these are very random phrases, very random words. And how is it, how are they used in the sentences? What are the common mistakes that we make? How is it positioned in a sentence? If we know how is it positioned in a sentence, we can never make a mistake again. So one of the most repeated words by non-English speakers, including me, sometimes when I get carried away, or including you, even if you are the best speaker of the language, we tend to use this word like I would like to say something, I would like to do this is like that, that is like this. This is the most abused word by Indians, if we say culturally specific, because we are searching for a word there. We don't know what that means. It means like that. Hangandre ಏನಂದ್ರೆ hangandre idu ಅಷ್ಟೇ. So this is very wrong to use like that. We have to. There are certain words which I don't know. It is wrong to say, but it becomes awkward after time, even if it makes sense, even if it makes meaning. So only 2 times like can be used. It can be used as a verb to express a preference or interest in a person or a place or a thing. So interest, preference. Really, it is a verb. I like your earring. Where did you get them? So here you are showing your preference or your liking. If I should not use that word to explain that, but your preference or your akin or whatever you might want to call it to that earring. And it is a verb. I know this is also very uh, familiar with all of us. It can be used as a preposition to ask for the description of a place, person, or a thing. I think this is where we falter a bit. Now, Kannada translate ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ complete difference ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ. First sentence. I like your earring. Where did you get them? ನಿನ್ನ ವಾಲೆ ನನಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟವಾಗ್ತಿದೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ತಗೊಂಡು? What is your English teacher like? ನಿಮ್ಮ English teacher ಹೇಗೆ? Right? ನಿಮ್ಮ ಎಷ್ಟು ಲಿಟ್ರಲ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರೋ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟ. ನಿಮ್ಮ English teacher ಹೇಗೆ ಅವರು? So these are two polar opposites or completely different things. Illi ishta, illi hege. You are inquiring something. So it is completely different. We always mess up with this word. I feel that the most word that we abuse is like. And iverdu aldira, iverdu situations aldira, ನಮ್ಗೆ ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ situations ಅಲ್ಲಿ ವರ್ಡ್ ಸಿಗಲ್ವೋ ಅವಾಗೆಲ್ಲ ಲೈಕ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. That is wrong. So, such, enough, and to. Another messy area in terms of language. Where to use so, where to use such, where to use to, enough. These are all defining words. What it defines is the degree of something. Uh, it's so cold today. That's such a pretty dress. You're adding an expression to say that this verb is not enough to define what I'm saying. It is much more than that. Again, I'm using a similar word. It is much more than that. How much more? It is so good. It is such a pretty dress. It is too good. It is too bad. I think that is enough. So you are,
ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರು
yes,
47 ಜನ 47 ಹೌದಾ 54 ಇದ್ರು
yes. So it is defining the degree of something. So and such. For emphasizing something, sometimes a substitute of very. Another tip that if you go to any corporate training, they would give is avoid using very. Another word that is most exploited by us is very. I love you very much. I like that very much, very much, very much. All we like to put everything before every word. We like to put very, defining how good it is. So we have to avoid using very. And there are some compound words which both replaces very and the next word that follows it. That I think that you can search online and you can make a list of those words and you can implement it in your language. Next word is too, more than necessary. So it is defining what, of course, this is the meaning is very simple. You've put too much sugar in my tea. And it is, they've specified the noun is uncountable. There are countable nouns and there are uncountable nouns. I ate too many biscuits. But biscuit is countable. Sugar you cannot count. Biscuit, sugar you can weigh or measure, but biscuit you can count. In both the cases, we use two. Because when it is uncountable, we tend to use two. But when it is countable, we think it is not appropriate there, but it is appropriate. Enough, of course, this is self-explanatory, the right amount of something. She is definitely smart enough to become a director. There aren't enough players to make a team. I think this is not a messy area, like I was saying. Everyone are fairly comfortable because, again, it is always the mother tongue influence. We have similar words in Kannada. That is why we never make mistakes here. So inside phrases, I would like to bring the messiest area in our language or the language usage. It is how time is represented in English language, whether when you're speaking or when you're writing. We always go wrong in representing time, being past, present, future, all the four tenses inside the present tense, inside the past tense, future tense is also conditional tense. Again, this is because we should go back to the first slide where we were talking about the syntax of a language. Ille syntax change of a language because time is represented very differently in English language. Something. So first, again, I would like to specifically say that we cannot cover entire present tense, or we cannot cover all the verb table in the very limited time we have. I think we are already approaching the end. So this is again a very random set of expressions or words or phrases where we commonly mistake. I have put a few words on the title. To happen, to plus infinitive is the basic form of the verb. Happens, simple present. happening, was happening, is happening is the present continuous. Just happened is the present participle. Have been happening is the just happened is the present perfect tense. Have been happening is the present perfect continuous tense. Now this verb table, I can't still get a hold of it. Uh, the approach to the learning of language, I would not even say approach, I would just say my experience. I can't say all the 16 tenses. I can't say which is present perfect continuous or which is past perfect continuous. Yes, I am an English teacher. When I'm teaching you, I would have prepared, I would have seen the note, and I would have come and I'm saying it. But why am I making this confession is neither can any one of us remember all those things. But our childhood traditional method of learning, if we have learned it perfectly, it is in your system. You need not remember what is present perfect continuous. But in a sentence, when you have a situation where you have to use present perfect continuous, you would have used it accurately. I think I belong to that category where I have it in my system that if I'm writing a sentence, I can confidently say that it won't be wrong. And that is possible only through incremental learning. I learned it right from third standard or fourth standard. So it can never happen in 1 hour. So you keep on incrementally learning. Like I've told a few phrases here. You keep on adding your skills of the language. Maybe every day one skill you can add. Maybe one day you can just see the grammar book or the dictionary. What is the meaning of this word, or what is the tense of this word? How is it present? What is active voice? What is passive voice? I think for drafting it is very important how to construct sentences in a passive voice. In other cases, we say don't construct sentences in a passive voice. Even in an academic paper, people say don't write in passive voice. But you write in passive voice and it is important. Just an observation. Not digressing, we'll quickly wind it up here. Just, already, yet. These are all present tense forms. A very short while ago, it happened. Whenever it happened, we confuse it with past tense. But it has just happened. I am talking. The time of the speaker speaking is important for the tense, not the action being done. It has happened. Nels just phoned with her exam results. It just happened. It is still present tense. Yes, it happened, but it is still present tense. Already, before now or earlier than you or I, expected by you or I, it is the speaker or the listener or the reader. Can you lock the back door? I have already locked it. Again, we are seeing ed here, locked it here. We assume it to be past tense. And when we are writing the sentence, we think it is past tense. We would have changed the helping verb also. That is wrong. It is still present tense. Your talk, the moment you are speaking is very important than the action, the actual action taking place. Yet, before now, yet means before now or until now. We use just and already mainly in positive sentences. Next is past. Happened, was happening, had been happening. All these are past tenses. Used to and would. I used to drive to work every day, but now I cycle. It's better for the environment. So where are you using used to? You're comparing the idea with a past idea. They often have the idea of comparison or change over time. And get used to. How long did you take you to get used to cycling? It is referring to past situations. You've already gotten used to cycling. How long did you take to get used to cycling, it is talking about a past situation. Again, cycling and the Krishna, we just have it as a part gerund and we think it is in present. No, it is past because we are talking about an action which was happening in the past. Again, continuing the focus on these confusions of past forms used in present or future, whatever. Where should you use past forms when it is not talking about past? When a plan isn't certain, I was thinking of going to that party later. I was thinking of going to that party later. Going, and it is now present and but the main verb is was thinking. ನಾನು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೆ. That is past tense. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವು I was thinking of was going or are going, is going. ತಪ್ಪಾಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. To be polite. I was wondering if your report was ready. I was wondering if your report was ready. The whole sentence is in present tense. I was wondering, ನಾನು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೆ, ಈ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್ ರೆಡಿ ಆಗಿದೆಯಾ ಅಂತ. ಎಲ್ಲ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಇದೆ, but we are using all past forms. To sound more urgent, it's time we left. It's only, if only I had more time. It's time we left. It is, the full form is, it is time we left. Again, we left another, it becomes past tense. And if only I had more time. I had more time, again it becomes past tense. Okay, then now the future tense. Will, would, shall, could, all these are future and conditional tenses. Earlier, when I used to be a kid, there used to not be a difference between a future tense and a conditional tense. A future tense is about an action which is about to happen. A conditional tense is about an action you're not sure whether it will happen or not. So the common mistake, the mistake area that we would have here is where and all we use the word would. Where should we use this word would? What are the use case scenarios of this word? When it is conditional, like I said, it is a separate tense now. It is recognized as a separate tense because we are not sure if the action is happening or not. I would memorize these sentences if I were you. I would, that is future tense, but if I were you, I don't know if I am you. I would memorize, but if I were you, I would memorize. Future in the past. When you started learning English, you knew you would be fluent one day. Again, when you started learning English, that is already past tense. But you knew you would be fluent one day. It is future tense. So again, you are using would when you are talking about a future tense about a past event. If you don't immediately get what I am saying because it can be unconnected, I will just share the PPT at the end of the session. You can go through it and I'll also share the resources as I've been saying. Reported speech, whenever you are converting direct speech to reported speech, whenever you are saying what someone has said and what someone has said as a future tense in the reported speech, you will use the word would. Finn said he would teach us how to use would. Again, it is a meta sentence about the word would. Repetition in the past. I would always make mistakes until I learned these examples. So, make mistakes, repeated mistakes. Polite request, would you try a little harder, please? So, in future, especially in interrogative sentences, especially in question forms, you would use, again, I'm saying would, you would use would when you are politely requesting something. I think it is 7:10. I think we are 5-10 minutes beyond my fixed time. I have shared some helpful resources and bibliography with this. Even if you can't access the PPT, I would like to say it loudly. BBC Learning English. It is a very good website with n number of worksheets, with n number of examples, with n number of rules, all in various levels. If you're a beginner, intermediate, advanced, they have all kinds of this. And if you're a bit of advanced learner, or if you feel that you know the language better, and you need it for your drafting purposes or writing a paper, a research paper, an academic paper, Purdue University has a portal called Online Writing Lab Purdue University. It is owl.purdue.edu. If you go there, it is very beautifully organized, and if you want to write a paper, and if you want to know the language components or how to use the language for writing, you can refer that website. And of course, if you want to keep a book for a reference at your home, the classic Renan Martin, I don't know how many have said it to you, but it is still the classic, it is still the best. And Oxford Learners editions and one series. There is Oxford Learners Grammar, there is Oxford Learners Dictionary. Normal books again ಜಾಸ್ತಿ expansive ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅದರೊಳಗೆ, and it is very useful for a book to keep. And another beautiful book that I have is How to Write and Speak Better, a Reader's Digest publication. Now, as we all know, even Reader's Digest is well known for its language. And many people who want to learn English still subscribe to Reader's Digest, whether they culturally relate to the content inside the magazine or not. They want to learn English, they subscribe to Reader's Digest. They have published a book called How to Write and Speak Better. It is a huge volume. I think I have it here. I'll show it. The book is divided into two parts. The first part is writing, and the second part is speaking. And it is a big chunk where you can you have all situations of speaking, all situations of writing, how to approach the language in these situations, like we were discussing, what are the common mistakes that we make and how to correct them. And finally, I would like to thank majorly Vikram sir for identifying me and inviting me to talk to you all, to share what all I have. Of course, as I've been saying, language cannot be taught in 1 hour. It takes years and it never stops. But what all I could make it into small capsules, I've tried to share with you. And as I told you in the beginning, this series have had right from the Chief Justice of Karnataka to all the legal luminaries. I'm just a kid, a new kid in the block, and I'm very humbled to participate in this webinar. I would have even participated in the webinar if I had known that a Chief Justice is talking online. But still, I'm very humbled and honored to be a part of the series. And I really hope that I have been at least a little help. As I've been saying, I cannot be of complete help. It is always incremental learning. At least a few bits if I have imparted into your mind or into your language, I feel I'm very successful. And this is the first engagement that I have. I've spoken to other audience as well, but as an independent person, this is my first engagement outside the college. So your feedback is most valuable for me. You can write it to me at pruthvikvbharadwaj@gmail.com. I repeat, pruthvikvbharadwaj@gmail.com, pruthvikvbharadwaj@gmail.com. I think I've finished this session. Thank you. Over to Vikram sir, I guess.
Thank you so much, Pruthwi. On a lighter way, firstly, it was very informative, and on a lighter way, let me say you have taken us back to the primary school. All right, from
Yes.
before to primary school. All right. Thank you so much. Before we end the session, we have the question and answer session. So some of our colleagues have a few questions. So we have a very senior member, Mr. Gupta. So he has a question. Sir, please go ahead.
Yes.
And we are unable to see you, Mr. Pruthwi. I think you're.
I'm seeing him. I'm seeing him.
Okay. All right. Please go ahead.
Okay. Wonderful, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Pruthwi has taken to the high school days. At that time, weekly once a grammar class period was there,
Yes.
and teachers insist us to go along with the Wren and Martin. Without a Wren and Martin, they would have sent us from the class.
Yes.
Then you are from National College, because I know Professor KDN, K. Dwarkanath.
Yes. Sir.
We used to call him as a Shakespeare of English. Am I correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Then we used to hear Professor C. Malati Rao in Vijaya College. You may be not knowing it, but you are aware of the K. Dwarkanath. Sir, knowledge is power. You agree with me? See, you can learn language by observance, by reading, by hearing the other learned speakers. That's how we learn the language. It may be Kannada, it may be English, it may be any language.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you that for an advocate, the language is an asset to him. To convey our communication skills to the learned judge, we have to have a good language.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Because that's an asset.
Yes.
First, the language is an asset. Then the knowledge in the law is also an asset.
Yes.
Without these two important aspects, we have to convince the judge. If you can't convince the judge, then we will not satisfy the judge. Sometimes, if it is a new judge, then with a good English, flowery language, we can convince him. If it's a senior judge, then it is not possible to convince him only in language. We have to convince him by legal question of law, question of fact, and everything is there. It is not my question. Just I wanted to share the information to Pruthwi. Thank you very much. Wonderful. I wanted to talk to you with regard to Professor K. Dwarkanath. He used to come with preparation that always suit, tie and all, with a big hair and all.
I'm very young, sir. I've only heard about him from the college.
Okay.
Fortunately, I have not seen him. If you know Shirin Nedungadi, madam, sir, I am her student.
Okay.
She used to work in KDN's days also.
Okay.
I'm one of the last batches to have had the privilege of being Shirin one student.
Okay, wonderful, sir. I had an occasion to hear Professor Dwarkanath.
Yes.
Wonderful, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck to you.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a blessing.
Learned members, do you have any questions related to grammar? Any more?
Hi. Hi. This is Tejaswini here.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Pruthwi, thank you for brushing up our basic grammar skills again. And special thanks to the Advocates Association Bengaluru for bringing this webinar series as well. Sir, I just wanted to know, can you please share some advice on any basic methods or strategies or anything, as a matter of fact, to bring our communicative skills better? Leaving apart the pronunciation skills from our regional background or geographical background, can we adopt some strategies to improve our basic communication skills? That's it.
Ma'am, there are two aspects of it. One is, of course, pronunciation. Pronunciation, I wanted to add a slide about it, but since it was basically about grammar, I didn't add it. ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಬರಿತೀವೋ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಅಥವಾ ನಾವು ಏನ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವೋ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಬರಿತೀವಿ. But English is different.
Yes.
It is not, you don't write how you speak. The writing is different, the spelling is different, the sounds are different, everything is different. In other words, Kannada letters and the sounds of the language are the same. But in English, letters and the sounds of language are different. Unfortunately, in our education system, we have not implemented learning phonetics as a skill. If we learn phonetics as a skill, phonetics is nothing but a chart of sounds in the language. Now, English
Exactly.
ABCD ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. It is ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ ಅದು completely different ಆಗಿದೆ ಏನೋ ಅಂತ. But ನೀವು English phonetic chart ನೀವು Google ಮಾಡಿ ತೆಗೆದು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ, it will be very similar to your Kannada ಅಕ್ಷರಮಾಲೆ. So ನಾವು ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಎಜುಕೇಶನ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಸೌಂಡ್ಸ್ ನ ಕಲಿಯೋದೇ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ ನಾವು. Unfortunate adu. That is why there is a gap between the pronunciation of words, or the gap between how we approach our mother tongue and how we approach English. There had to be this extra skill that we had to acquire, but unfortunately we haven't acquired. And coming to how you speak or communication skills, it is just repeating whatever I've been saying again. Incremental learning, hear more, speak more, read more, write more. There is no shortcut for that. If you ask any writer, how do you write books? I read 100 books and I wrote one book. Right? That's how it is. So there is no shortcut for that. But when you want to improve the language, you can become a conscious observers when people are speaking. That way you can pick up skills or pick up certain tips or anything like that. That would be useful. That approach would be useful. As a learner and a teacher, even when someone is speaking the language, any language for that matter, I would be observing how is he constructing the sentences, not in the way of saying that you are wrong. It is also, like I said, descriptive grammar is also on the rise. It is also how people are used. So if you become more keen observer, I think you can pick up more skills of the language.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Trivikram, for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, anybody else? Do we have any more questions, learned members? I think that
Anita
yes.
here.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
first of all, I would like to thank Pruthwi for being a great speaker. Of course, it imparted a lot of knowledge, even though we know English. Somewhere that word "like," where we use very often, even in the quotes, something that we are aware of now. Thank you, Pruthvi, for that. And I thoroughly enjoyed. I joined a little late, but I enjoyed your session. Of course, I was teaching English in Davos College, but I understand how difficult it is for you to have prepared so much. It is really nice. Thank you very much, Pruthvi.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a blessing. Thank you.
Any more questions? Can we wind up the session? So I think that's about it. Mr. Pruthwi, once again, I thank you for your time, and you have thanks for accepting our invitation. All right. And thanks for a wonderful session as well. All right. So we would be, today Mr. Pruthwi has taken us back to the school, and tomorrow we will be taking back to the law college, because tomorrow's topic of discussion is the case law that we had studied during our law college days, Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, a landmark judgment, a celebrated judgment in the Indian history of Indian Constitution. So, tomorrow we have a legal luminary, a senior advocate, Mr. S.S. Naganand, who will be taking us back to Keshavananda Bharati's case. So, once again, I thank all the viewers. Thank you so much. So, we'll be winding up the session. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you very much.